Thank you very much, Chair. I'll try to keep to the time that I've been given. Now, the structure of the reform we think is good. We do think that a good methodology can be a good methodology to work with. What we're more concerned about is that the rapporteurs seem to be open to negotiate on the content with other members of the groups. Sometimes we see this grand coalition dynamic in the Parliament, and I don't think that choosing that really means that we can negotiate. And I think that we could have a shadows meeting working on this draft rather, or this dynamic of exclusion and a grand coalition. I don't want to see that continued in these negotiations and the final report. Now, we don't have very much time, so there is one element that's crucial for us, and that is that the reality is really too heavy. It's too much. We always seem to be running behind these scandals, and I think that's shown by what is actually happening. And the actual truth is that we haven't really managed to tackle these structural problems. They've turned the EU into a colander when it comes to tax evasion, such as these banking secrecy, circulation of capitals, or movement of capitals, and things that are happening within the EU and in the periphery. These are things that we have to be done, but it's like a swimming pool where there is one tiny leak and all the water leaks out of that tiny hole. And actually, this is full of holes, structural holes that we don't seem to be tackling. And what we're also concerned about is that issues that have been put forward in previous reports, PANA papers, TAX3 1 and 2, for example, that have been endorsed and approved by the European Parliament beforehand by the plenary, are not consolidated. The PANA and tax points aren't in this report, and we think that it's really taking steps backward when there are steps that have already been taken by the European Parliament, and we're sliding backwards on those. For example, we're talking about intermediaries rather than other terms. So I think that that isn't acceptable, and we really do have to have a specific section in this report on facilitators in this report. And nor can we only be talking about banks in the part on money laundering, when it has been shown time and again that they are facilitators, that they are participating in all sorts of fraudulent activities, in tax avoidance and tax evasion. The PANA report was clearer about elements such as sanctions on facilitators, and that seems to have disappeared from this draft report as well. And then tax amnesty, that again is something that ought to was clearer in PANA and isn't there. So we really are seeing areas where we're sliding backwards, and we think that it's also a problem that we're talking about turnover, and that cannot be linked to the actual profit in places like Luxembourg, Cyprus and elsewhere. So the other issues that are linked to tax evasion, we again think that the PANA report was an awful lot clearer on this particular point. And also in the PANA report it was clearer on financial investigation, and the report carried out by the investigations of us had an awful lot in there that we again don't feel have been included in this particular report. And the Intercommittee as well carried out a report in 2016 on this topic, which also could have been referred to. And we feel that there are other aspects as well that are referred to, but where you could be critical. In the list of tax havens, for example, well, they think this is really taking the mickey here, that saying that you're only recognising 6 countries, none of them in the EU, all of them developing. So I'm going to conclude on this. We also feel that the BEPS point as well. Now, we feel that elsewhere it's been shown that it is insufficient. The basic principles of it are insufficient, and more should be done about that. And then the renegotiation of tax treaties that recognise what the economic reality is of multinational companies. And one last point. We do understand that this has to be done within the UN rather than... Thank you.
We must stick to the time frame because Commissioner is here in half an hour.